Hello YouTube, this is Scott back with one of these quick videos. I'll say quick, going over the Sega Saturn magazines. Really quite enjoyed doing the last one, actually just going through it from my own point of view really, and it's quite a fun sort of going through it and seeing how things panned out, I guess. So I thought I'd do the next video. So this is issue 18. This is from April 1997. So obviously on the front cover we've got one of the Saturn sort of major Western hits, which was a Duke Nukem 3D. So this is the monster hit of 97, world exclusive. So we have on the front cover Resident Evil first real Saturn shots, Sky Target, Mass Destruction, Syndicate Wars, Return Fire, Sega Touring Car, exclusive interview. So yeah, quite a big time in the Saturn's life really. You had quite a few major games coming out that were on the horizon as well really. Manx TT as well. Obviously when Duke Nukem come out, that really was one of the I suppose you would say it was kind of the equivalent of maybe a PUBG or a Fortnite. That's how big it was back in the day. You know, Duke Nukem 3D on PC. It was a big game coming out. So, as always, first page is an advert for Hexen. Said in the last video, I'm not too familiar with this game. I know it's sort of set in a mythical Dungeons and Dragons. It obviously did come out on PlayStation. I said that I don't believe it did. It also got ported to the N64 as well. I know that. Yeah, one of the Saturn's sort of better 3D first-person shooters. So, contents. So you have the Duke Nukem 3D, Manx TT. This section coin operated here, where they had the latest news from the arcades when the arcades were still a thing. It is a bit of a funny angle for the camera, you can see that. So yeah, lots of news and games coming out for the Saturn. I think by this time it was pretty clear that the Saturn was really struggling against the PlayStation, but I don't think it was completely down and out. I think it was only really down and out when Sega sort of washed their hands of it really. So, news first off the bat is Resident Evil first Saturn screenshots, very blurry screenshots. So it says on these pages you will find the first Saturn shots of Resident Evil, and there's only 3 of them. Rest assured, they are the only Saturn shots of the game that Capcom of Japan have released to the press. Any others you might have seen are merely PlayStation shots. How do we know this? Well, Capcom of Japan held a special press conference for the Resident Evil series in Japan on February the 17th, where they discussed the Saturn version of this seminal classic, along with their plans for Resident Evil 2 on the PlayStation. So, if anyone's caught the Digital Foundry recent video where they discuss Resident Evil 2 in detail, and I was completely unaware, there was a sort of what they call Resident Evil 1.5, which was completely redone. Very different to what we got as Resident Evil 2, and I imagine that was probably the game that they were referring to here. So, on the next page we've got Quake, exclusive news sensation. Recently, Sega of America finally got around to announcing that it had licensed 3 major products from GT Interactive. Abe's Odyssey, which never made it, Duke Nukem 3D. New details have finally emerged regarding Quake, possibly the most exciting game of the bunch. So obviously Quake was a massive game as well, probably even bigger than Duke Nukem in terms of hype. You know, it was a game that sort of pushed PCs. You had to have a meaty PC, and for it to get ported over to consoles was no mean feat really. So these are PC shots, and it does rightly say, while it's unlikely that Saturn Quake will have quite the resolution of the PC version, you can rest assured it will be the game of the highest quality thanks to the lobotomy. Obviously their engine will need a bit of work in order to produce the lovely shadows and what you have, but you can be assured that no one more qualified to carry out the conversion. Let's hope there's 2 machine link-up modes. I don't believe there was, but they didn't half do a fantastic job of getting that game running on the Saturn. So the charts, this was, they're also advertising the fact that they're giving away a demo CD next month. Sega really stepped it up on the Dreamcast. The Dreamcast was had a demo disc every issue on the official, whereas the Saturn one was much more sporadic. Probably just due to content coming out, whereas the PlayStation was, you know, it was brimful of demos and games every week. Sorry, every month. You could spend quite a good few hours just playing the demo disc on the PlayStation, I remember. Whereas the Saturn one, they only released, I believe, 7 demo discs on the official Sega Saturn magazine, not including the Christmas Nights nor the Panzer Saga disc 1. So there were only 7, I believe, and one of them was the Sega Flash, which you got free with the console. So we've got the charts, Blockbuster, rest in peace. Quite a unauthentic Angelina Jolie there. Just some random girl. Looks like Independence Day, top video rental, and for some reason there's also 2 top 10 rental videos charts. So you've got Independence Day, and you've got Aladdin and Mission Impossible at number 2. So I'm not really quite sure what the difference is. Top 10 video games, Doom doesn't quite say if it's the Saturn version. I imagine it would be, yeah. Bedlam, GT Interactive, Mirage, PlayStation Saturn. Not overly familiar with that game. HMV charts, Dark Saver is at number 1, Virtua Fighter 3, Coin Op, that's just, I imagine, what they want. Readers charts. So this is Zap Snowboarding Tricks. That was obviously a Japanese Sega Saturn game that only came out in Japan. Bit of a strange one because snowboarding games were quite the rage back then. Cool Borders was quite a big game on the PlayStation. It seemed like quite a logical game to port to the European market, but for some reason it seems like the games like that were staring in the face just to get more games out, really, and clearly they didn't. N64, so this must have been the time that the N64 was released. I don't know specifically when. I know the N64 was 97, but I think it was early 97, so I imagine this was probably around the time that the console was around the corner. CVG, Computer and Video Games. This was a great magazine back in the day as well. A real magazine that had very, very early footprint in the sort of UK games, video games sort of magazine history, really. I mean, it really sort of dated back to, you know, the very, very early sort of British home computers, things like the Spectrum and the early Commodores. You know, it's 185 at 1997, and it carried on well into the sort of the next decade as well. I couldn't tell when it actually come to an end. It has been gone for quite some time, which was unfortunate because it really was quite an excellent multi-format magazine. But unfortunately, you know, there's not much in the way of video game magazines now, is there? I think you've generally got the official offerings. Games Masters recently died as well, hasn't it? And so has Games TM. So the only ones I really would recall is you've got Edge, which is I've always found quite stuck up its own arse, really. But I appreciate it's more industry, but you know, it is written as it's almost written in the third person, you know, as in Edge doesn't agree with this game. It's just like, well, why can't Dave, the guy writing it, just use his name? But that's the style. But Edge soldiers on. You know, that's been obviously going for very, very early time scale as well. You have the official Xbox, official PlayStation, and I think Retro Gamer as well, ironically. I do actually think Retro Gamer is quite a healthy magazine. So, some great games that were left in Japan here. Metal Slug, which is a really good conversion on Saturn. There's no, not so good, I think, compared to the Neo Geo. I think it does suffer from slowdown. And King of Fighters 96, obviously King of Fighters 95 come out, but I don't believe it did too well, because it's not a game you see very common in PAL. So SNK have released a new King of Fighters game in Japan, King of Fighters 96. It actually comes in 3 different formats. The first, CD only, has long loading times and reduced animations. It's worth coughing up the extra for the RAM cart edition of the game, which boosts the Saturn's internal memory by 33%, thus enabling every frame of animation from the coin-up to be included. The final version of the game is a ROM card edition, which reduces load times. It may be faster, but only works with King of Fighters 96. The good thing about RAM card edition, the card works with every game. The real Battlefield Fury and Capcom's Cyberbots. So yeah, I didn't necessarily know that it had a ROM cart as well. 96. I knew 95 did, and I know 95 doesn't work without it. So Duke Nukem 3D. So like I said, this was a massive game, and it was quite gobsmacking just how close it was to the PC. So despite the fact that the current Duke Nukem demo doesn't even feature a complete level on the PC original, it's still looking very, very close indeed. What we've done here is to show a shot from the current extremely early Saturn version and compare it alongside a shot of the completely finished PC game. As you can see, already Lobotomy have performed wonders with the Saturn conversion, and they haven't even started properly yet. You expect big things from this game. Best people the job behind the conversion. And yeah, they were. So yeah, it does look really good. It plays really smoothly as well. It's got some fantastic lighting effects. The early systems, early consoles, early 3D consoles didn't necessarily have. And here you have a sort of interview with Lobotomy. I think these interviews get lost to the pages of history sometimes, and I think they become quite informative to look back on, because these companies are no longer with us, and you know, the people that program them have long since moved on. But yeah, really interesting. This will give them a serious read. Syndicate Wars. Now, I don't believe this came out on PlayStation. Sorry, Saturn. I know it came out on PlayStation, but I think it was cancelled. I couldn't really tell you too much about it. It kind of looks like an isometric. Looks a bit like Crime Wave, doesn't it, on the Saturn? Sky Target. So this is a conversion of a Model 2 arcade game. Not one I'm familiar with. I think I caught some footage on Sega Lord X's channel recently, where he was comparing Saturn to Model 2 arcade games, and this one didn't appear to come across too well with development. So it's kind of, from what it looks as kind of like a 3D afterburner, but without the kind of manic craziness of it all. But I mean, from these screenshots, it looks okay, but apparently it does sort of chug along with low frame rate and some sort of poor textures. Independence game, Independence Day. So I have played this game back in the day as well. I believe I rented it, and it was really, really poor back then. It was you fly these aeroplanes underneath massive sort of alien spaceships that cover an entire city, and you have certain missions to complete, and it really isn't a very good game. So it makes me laugh with these sort of previews that come out, and they're all glowing with positivity with previews, but when the review comes, it turns out to be a bit of a turd. And surely if they played it during the preview, it would kind of give that impression. Crypt Killer by Konami. So I believe probably not Konami's finest hour, but I think this was an arcade light gun game. I believe it plays better on the PlayStation as well. Not that there's too many of these kind of games on both systems, so I suppose if you play them, if that's your kind of bag, you might enjoy it. Can't say I'm too familiar with it myself. These kind of very pixelated 2D characters haven't aged very well. Return Fire. So, Return Fire, that looks very, very similar to Mass Destruction in terms of just the screenshots. Again, I couldn't necessarily tell. It's not one I'm familiar with. Did it even come out on the Saturn? This is the thing with looking at these early magazines. There's a lot of games that didn't come out that were previewed, and the first 18 months, everything that was coming out was multi-platform between Saturn and PlayStation, really. But gradually after that second year, a hell of a lot didn't make it, or didn't come out, didn't get finished. So strangely, you've got a magazine for PlayStation in the official Sega Saturn magazine. So clearly maybe targeting owners of both systems, but you would think that would probably have been better maybe in another PlayStation magazine. But it may be the same publishing organisation. What is this, Future? Not really too sure. I believe Future did the Dreamcast one, which the official Dreamcast magazine, which wasn't as good as this one. So Virtua Writer, get it? Virtua Writer. So again, these are always quite entertaining to look back on again, aren't they? Because back in the day we didn't really have, the internet was still in its early days, and I remember I had access to the internet. My grandparents had a PC. I think it was a 486 or maybe Pentium 1, and it had a very, very slow dial-up modem. So we had access to the internet, but it was confusing and it was messy back then. So sourcing information wasn't what it was like now. So this was really the only kind of way that you could get specific information. And again, most of these letters, because whenever you look back at these magazines, regardless of the generation or regardless of the system, if you're reading a magazine which is written for the underdog, then half of it is slagging off the game that was, or the system that was more popular, like this chap here. So I'm writing to you about your response to Virtua On. I've played it and think it's rubbish. The best part about it is the graphics. Blah blah blah. What the hell did you get a 93% rating? I just need to get that off my chest. I would like to add, why the hell don't Sega pull their finger out and get some adverts going? I say this because the area which I live in is riddled damn PlayStations, and they will not listen to me about the Saturn. They think Ridge Racer Revolution is better than Sega Rally. Aren't they stupid? So, I think kind of looking back, you think that you do sound like a bit of an idiot. But it was like bitter back then. It wasn't quite 16-bit levels of animosity, but I think people were very passionate about their systems. It's not the same as now. I don't think kids are overly bothered whether, I mean, it's all whether it's PlayStation or Xbox or Nintendo. I don't think kids are overly that, they don't get that same kind of gist anymore regarding it. So Virtua On can initially appear as being a very shallow game. It's only when you realise that using the boost button in conjunction with your various weapons produce many different attacks, which in turn leads to many new strategies, which I thought I'd explained earlier. The game is awesome and moves into stratospheric territories of excellence when you play it in two-player mode, hence me marking it up to 94% the following issue. Virtua On deserves every percent of its score, as I think most Saturn owners will testify. I suggest you go back and play it some more and don't bother us again, and yes, they are very stupid indeed. So Richard Lieber, I've mentioned him before, he very knowledgeable guy, the editor of this, Lee Nutter as well, the other guy. I believe he went on to bigger and better things as well within the sort of publishing industry or journalism industry within games. Questions and answers. I'm not going to spend too long on these, but which game should I buy next? Tomb Raider, Fighting Vipers, or should I wait until a decent new game comes out? Get Tomb Raider, it's ace. So yeah, obviously the obligatory adverts from Special Reserve. Manx TT, really good arcade style. It is an arcade motorbike racing game based on the Isle of Man TT. Quite shallow. There's only 2 tracks on it. Obviously, there's not that many tracks on the Isle of Man anyway. But yes, I mean, there is an Isle of Man game that's come out on the PS4 recently, and kind of shows how far we've come. You know, people are prepared to pay 50 quid for a game with 2 tracks, and it's a bit gobsmacking really. So this is really just an overview, I'd imagine, of the tracks, and it tells you about the courses. Yeah, I don't actually own this. I had it on PAL. Never really played much of it, to be fair. So you got TT course. I think that's the one which is the that's the really dangerous one on the TT. I mean, obviously all of it is lethal, but on the TT, I think it's the TT course, which is the one that goes through all the towns. And you click a curb or a drain on that, you've had it. So here they're just explaining the 2 different bikes, and it's also compatible with the analog pad, which we kind of take for granted back in the day. It's we take that for granted now, don't we? Analog controls. We take many things for granted, don't we? So tanktastic. So this is mass destruction. Said about this in the last issue. Really, really good game. Kind of similar to Strike, an arcade interpretation of like the Strike series. A bit of sort of like micro machines. You've got a tank, and the idea is that you you have missions, but you can literally destroy everything, and it's, I said before, it's quite similar to Blast Corps on the N64 as well. I think it's Blast Corps. Yeah, very, very good game. Really quite a hidden gem, I think, on Saturn and PlayStation. It's a game that, whilst the visuals, the polygons are quite basic, you know, a lot of them don't have any textures, but they're quite rudimentary, but they're quite appealing as well. So Sega Touring Car Championship, rather. I think this was one of the biggest disappointments on the Saturn when it came out. I don't think it was a really great arcade game from the start. It was just too fast, and really didn't play very well at all. It's just way too fast. The cars are, whilst it's an arcade game, it's not meant to be realistic, but there's there's a level of control that is absent in it. And I do think the actual Saturn conversion is quite a not bad in terms of graphically, but it suffers from frame rate, and I would have thought that the best thing that they would have done would have been to kind of slow it down a peg and use the same kind of engine maybe running Sega Rally and that sort of pace, and it would have maybe worked a treat. But yeah, so this guy here, Tetsuya Mitsuguchi, quite a famous developer in Sega, kind of gets overshadowed by Yu Suzuki and Yuji Naka and the other guys, but he's done a lot of games. He did Rez. He's also done the Lumines on PlayStation, and he's recently done the is it the Tetris Effect? So he does a lot of these kind of psychedelic, kind of out there games. I think he did. Was it the Child of Eden as well? Have a look at him. He's done a lot of games. He obviously did Sega Rally as well. And again, another sort of interview with a developer that's been sort of lost. So there are some actually really good questions here. How easy was the Model 2 board to use when it came to program? What are its strengths and weaknesses? What kind of design process is used to put the course maps together? Did the team get to race with any touring cars? Well, no, because it's too bloody quick. It's a touring car on the internet. So sega.co.jp/Sega Arcade Touring. All computer-equipped Saturn owners are probably well aware of the brilliant web presence Sega of Japan have built up. Crazy times. Simpler times. The Art of Star Wars. There's got to be a paid advert, I would imagine, because this has got nothing. There was no Star Wars games on the Saturn. The PlayStation had quite a few. There was Rebel Assault 2, Masters of Triaski, which was the fighting game. They were both early games, and then later on you had the sort of the Episode 1 and Episode 2, like the Star Wars Racer coming out. But in terms of Saturn, there was nothing. So what's all this Star Wars malarkey got to do with Saturn? Well, the truth is not a lot really. Unfortunately for Sega, only Nintendo and Sony currently hold licenses to produce Star Wars video games. Sega has no plans at the moment to release any Saturn-based Star Wars titles, and no reason why pixel-perfect version of Star Wars Arcade couldn't be produced. Yeah, so that's the way it was to be, really. At the time, I thought that the Star Wars games were quite a mixed bag. Some of them were pretty good, some of them were downright awful. So yeah, more kind of adverts. So it's gone into detail, but yeah. Elevator action. So quite a sought after game on Saturn. Quite a pricey one. It is a sequel to a NES game, I believe. They're called Elevator Action, and again, this is the only way that you can sort of play it. I don't think it's been ported over to any other systems, and it's a bit of a sort of hidden gem, and it's not really hidden, but people are well aware that it's a really good game. And it plays quite easily in English as well. I think all of it is in English, so hence which has bumped the price up quite a lot. So now I think it's averaging about £150, probably even a bit more now, as everything else goes up. But yeah, Elevate Action. Again, considering this is the official Sega Saturn magazine and it's advising on Saturn games in Japan, you know, that kind of shows what Sega needed to do when the official magazine was promoting games that weren't coming out. But yeah, what's happened really. So Manx TT Superbike. So you can get £5 off Manx TT at game. 91%. Although lastability could have been improved, Manx TT is a tough, enjoyable experience which does a great job of bringing the arcade game to Saturn. Yeah, it does. It is a decent little game. It is a decent little game. I'm not too sure if it was converted over by Sega. No, I don't think it was, but yeah, it wasn't bad. Area 51, so this is a Midway arcade shooter, isn't it, I believe. And yeah, again, a bit like Crypt Killer, isn't it? It's sort of, it was kind of like early 90s, you know, digitized pixelated graphics, wasn't it? 72%. Incredible Hulk, 15%. Jesus. So that is, I did know that this game was pretty bad. So there's been a long line of Marvel games on Sega systems, from the original Spider-Man games on Master System and Mega Drive through to the current Capcom arcade conversions such as X-Men Children of the Atom. Most Marvel games have a reputation of being rubbish. Witness Hulk and Captain America games on Mega Drive, for example. Here at Sega Saturn magazine, we'd like to see version 4-player X-Men scrolling beat 'em up that was knocked around in the arcades a few years ago. Yeah, that was really good. It was a top laugh and Saturn could no doubt handle the spawn conversion. How about it, Konami? So they said about the Incredible Hulk. The Incredible Hulk is the most malformed, hideous, shambling mockery of a travesty we've ever seen. This is the worst game officially released for the Saturn. 15%. Lastability 3%. IDOS. The style of the game is called a walk and hit. I don't think they really knew what to call it. It sounds like more of a side-scrolling sort of beat 'em up, really, doesn't it? But I actually think this is. I mean, obviously, it's not going to be in the sort of hundreds, but it's actually a sort of more than what you would expect to pay for a shit game. I think it hovers around the £40 to £50 mark. I might be incorrect, but yeah, back then, this was just when anyone could get a license. You know, that's why you got IDOS here producing this game, Capcom, Konami. You know, it was just anything for anyone sort of licenses, really, weren't it? Lost Vikings, North by Northwest. And they say 89%. Look beyond the 16-bit graphics and there's a whole lot of gameplay just waiting to be discovered. Recommended for arcade, recommended for action puzzle fanatics. Again, not played this game, so I think it's kind of, from what I understand, it's kind of similar to a Lemmings strategic kind of, you know, thinking about the character and the situation, how's best to proceed with the level. Again, I think it's quite a pricey title nowadays. Iron Man versus Exo Manowar. And again, another Marvel, and this one's done by Acclaim. So it's better than Incredible Hulk. I can't say I've heard of Exo Manowar. Back then, this is when Iron Man was kind of like a C-list character for Marvel, wasn't he? He was never a massive character. Now, obviously, he's one of the big sort of names in it. So with little variation and a dull gameplay and terrible graphics, this is one game to be avoided at all costs. A very poor offering from Acclaim. Yeah, these sort of games, they are concerned, just need to go in the bin really, don't they? Mass Destruction, so I was saying about this earlier, this is a great little title. 87%. Quite tricky in parts, but yeah, really good fun. Spot Goes to Hollywood. So I think this was just a conversion of like the Mega Drive game, wasn't it? Spot Goes to Hollywood couldn't hold a candle to the more recently developed software such as Sonic 3D. Yeah, they're both isometric games, aren't they? But just kind of like 16-bit game, really, isn't it? So quite simply, too little, too late, far too late, in fact. Let down by sloppy controls. Spot is outclassed every way Sonic 3D, and as such is not worth your attention. So X-Men X3. So this game is probably, I would say maybe in PAL regions, probably one of the top 3 most expensive games. Maybe top 5, depending on where. If you go by CEX, I think it's actually right up there. Typical X-Men, Mega Man, limited availability. I always found that Mega Man was quite a niche kind of character in Europe. It never really caught on. When you watch the big, American tubers, they talk about things like Mega Man and Castlevania. Whilst they're great games, they've never. I always found that they never were huge titles in Europe. Especially Mega Man. I think it goes down to that whole NES thing. Mega Man was huge on the NES. It was kind of up there with Mario, wasn't it? And because the NES really never caught on over here, we never really kind of got exposed to it too much. Obviously, it did come out on the SNES, but it was never a kind of, a big title coming out. But yeah, this was the only Mega Man game that come out on the Saturn in PAL regions. There's a shit ton that come out in Japan. Like I said, because again I've never really been exposed to it too much, I couldn't really tell you the differences. I think the X is they're kind of like a side story or like a retelling of the games. They don't really fit into the sort of Mega Man canon. They're their own thing, but only 66%, which probably is fair because it's literally just a SNES game, isn't it? I think the later ones were developed specifically for the Saturn and the PlayStation, so they bump it up a little bit more. But X3. I think, like I said, I couldn't tell if even that was the 3rd one in a series. But yeah, expensive game now. Really expensive game. I think you're looking at nearly 300 notes for that, for a good condition one. Maybe get it cheaper on an auction, but on average it seems to be going for 300. So Sega Saturn tips, cheats. Always loved these back in the day. I think these ones with the official magazines, they were generally pretty good at being correct. But when you start getting down and dirty into the unofficial magazines, they were just pulling things out their arse in terms of, you know, cheats and, you know, what you could do. And I remember me and my mate, we were playing Echo the Dolphin, and there was a cheat that supposedly let you control. There's a section on the level on the game where you go to like the, you know, an ice level, and you control a blue whale, or you don't control it, but you see a blue whale and you communicate with him. And supposedly there was a cheat that you could control him, and it's just a load of crap. There was nothing that allowed you to control this whale. But me and my mate, we were at it for hours trying to figure it out. But yeah, it's a Die Hard trilogy. Good game. I think these could have been launched independently of each other, each of them in their own, because they are kind of their own games, really. I don't necessarily think this is Die Hard 1, isn't it? The third person take on it hasn't aged very well, but I think there's certainly the light gun one, quite gory as well. The light gun game, I remember that, and that's not too bad. And then you've got Die Hard with a Vengeance, which is kind of like a Grand Theft Auto style game. Dark Savior. It's another sort of JRPG. Yeah, an isometric angle. Tomb Raider. Lots, but again, Tomb Raider was a tough game to get through, and this was, you know, these sort of guides were really your only way of, you know, if you were stuck, these were the only way to try and get through it. Coin operated. So this is obviously just going on about the latest arcades. So Red Earth. So this was a CP System 3 arcade board. Now I don't think there was any CP 3 games that come out on the Saturn. Might be pushing it a little bit too far in terms of what it could do. But I don't think there any did. I might be wrong. But this is a funny game. It's I've only ever played this on Xbox main, and I mean, you've got these huge characters. It's really out there, and I don't really know how. And there's no plays like Street Fighter, but I couldn't recall playing it too much. I think at this point the 2D games had reached, certainly the fighters had reached a point where they were getting so detailed, they were just throwing any old stuff around. So this is just a rundown of games again. What did well last month? Soviet Strike was Game of the Month, 90%. Digital Dance Minutes there, looks like Dance Dance Revolution, doesn't it? Next month, True Excitement gains magazine form in next month's Sega Saturn magazine. Resident Evil explored in detail, Syndicate Wars. So yeah, and then you've got Swagman again, another expensive game on the Saturn. Okay guys, so thank you for watching. If you managed to listen to me rambling on and gibberish, oh, got my phone case. So yeah, if you managed to, you know, listen to me rambling on about a load of gibberish for however long, I don't know, a long time, yeah, I might do another one. Take care, YouTube.